Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Little Lunch Online, hosted by our amazing friends at Feral Arts and the Arts Front. My name is Caroline Bowditch, and I am lucky enough to be the CEO at Arts Access Victoria. I want to just start by acknowledging the land that I am coming to you from, which is the land of the Boonwurrung people. I'm on unceded land, and I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people that might be joining us today from wherever they are. Please feel free to share where you're coming to us from in the chat on the side of the screen. Just a few housekeeping notes. Today's little lunch is 30 minutes long, even though Kath and I could talk to each other for weeks, if not years. As you'll find, today's being recorded and live streamed via YouTube, and the viewing will be available afterwards on the Little Lunch website, which is www.llol.com.au. And that is usually pretty available in a very speedy way, thanks to the incredible technical abilities of these people. Please keep your mics muted if you're not speaking. And as I said, you're invited to introduce yourself in the Zoom chat and say whose country you're on today. And please use the chat for any questions that you might have. We've got live paraphrase captions today. If that's something that you'd like to make the most of, please click on the CC, the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. And also we have the fabulous Michelle as our Auslan interpreter today. If you want to get a clearer view of Michelle, please click on her image and pin her to your screen so that she'll remain your main focus whilst we get on with our chat. This is amazing, and this is actually a conversation that I've been wanting to have with Kath for some time, and it came out of a conversation that when we did a little lunch with Maddie Little, who's also with us, a couple of weeks ago. Colleague of ours, Jeremy Hawkes, asked the question about, is there a disability arts movement in Australia? And Kath, who is a legend, it's the only way I can describe you in kind of disability arts and the disability rights movement here in Australia, but also internationally. Her CV is as long as my body, and the amount of things that she's done in life and the conversations that she's instigated, the way that she has progressed, the thinking and the dialogue around disability arts, disability and sexuality, so many other things, has been significant. And it's just an honour and a pleasure to be having this conversation with you today, Kath. So
same.
So much for joining us and being here. And thank you all for being here to be part of this conversation. Kath, we've been doing some reminiscing, but I want to really start with asking you about, what was the first disability arts project that you worked on? When was that?
It was 1987 or 86, and I was a student at UTS in Sydney, the Uni of Technology, and I was studying video and film and other things, and actually working at Triple J as a journalist casually. And I was approached by the Australian Quadriplegics Association, we just call AQA in Sydney, and they had funding, local funding, to make a video with some of the only guys, which I thought was really weird, but these wheelchair using guys that came to AQA. And so I said, yeah, sounds fun, and signed up for it. And at the beginning I asked AQA, what do you want us to make? Something about the grounds here or what you do or whatever. And they said, no, make whatever you like. And so the guys came up with this script about a group of disabled guys sitting in a pub trying to get money. They're all broke, and they decide they're going to break into a bank, but the bank is inaccessible. They try another bank that's inaccessible. On the third bank, these robbers are coming out. They trip over the wheelchair guys. The wheelchair guys grab the money and run off. Now, look, I thought that was great. So, and it was quite a thing, you know, storyboarding it and, you know, rehearsing it and shooting it and editing it. Finally, we had it done. Everyone thought it was hilarious. We handed it over to AQA, and then I rang them back, about a month later, because I wanted to put it in for a festival. And they said they would not allow it in because it showed these criminal acts and this and this, and it was shocking. And I should slow down, sorry. I said, you said we could do whatever you wanted, we wanted, but obviously they didn't really mean that. But very interestingly, so I was 25 or 26. Check this, in the credits for that video, I appeared with my permission under this tag that had "and able-bodied assistance by." I kid you not. And I remember looking at it, because we all thought only real disabled people used wheelchairs. Even I did. And that was a real turning point, because that niggled and niggled and niggled away on my head. And through that connection, I met two legends in New South Wales in disability arts, Arnie Hanna and Dave King, who introduced me to accessible arts in New South Wales. And that's how it all started.
Amazing.
I know it's a bit embarrassing, but it's a good one. You know what I mean?
It's not embarrassing. It's great. We all start somewhere, and then it's those moments, isn't it? Those light bulb moments, or the kind of doors that open, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go this way. Amazing. I really like that idea that those guys became the trip hazard, which I think is a key for so much of the change that needs to happen in the world, is we just need to be trip hazards. So that's really interesting. So here in Melbourne, there have been, over many, many years, there have been a variety of disability arts gatherings, and one of them was the Art of Difference Festival, which happened a long time ago. And I know Julie McNamara, who's joining us from the UK at 3 a.m, has attended more than one of those Art of Difference festivals. That festival doesn't happen anymore, and we still feel the loss of that, and it's a constant question for AAV about, is that something that we might restart at some point? So I wonder if you can just talk about, what were those gatherings like? What was the topics of conversation? What happened at the first one that you were at, Kath?
I've got a few reactions to that. So Art of Difference was an amazing thing, but one of its strengths was that it was initiated outside of Arts Access, so that Arts Access didn't have to be entirely responsible. And so that's a great arrangement there, where it's not all just on the one org. So that was an arrangement that a venue owner, Crusader Hillis, Hares and Hyenas, who was then AD at Gasworks Arts Park, which is where the first Art of Difference festival came from. And Crusader has been a very keen supporter of disability arts, virtually almost from when I was, going quite some time back. So that was a real strength of that. You know, should Arts Access do it again? If you can find a venue that's going to go, oh, we're going to do all the ticketing and all the this and the this and the this and the that, and just give us the talent, I mean, that would be great, you know. And actually, I think you've got a sort of arrangement with Arts Centre coming up for 2021 that's a bit like that. And we're yet to kind of, you know, influence that and see what happens. But back to the early days. So, you know, I'm one of those privileged people that's been able to travel around Australia and in Asia and in Europe and the States, attending disability arts hubs of different sorts, and not all Australians get that. So if we go back to the first Art of Difference, which actually sort of started in 2001, it was like like a sort of a mini festival, you might call it, which was part of Word Is Out, which is Hes and Hyena's usual, summer festival of queer everything that goes with Midsummer Festival. So back in the day, a lot of us were meeting each other for the very first time. And the debates, because those sort of events are about the shows, but they're also about the debates. And sometimes the shows become a bit blurry, but what you remember are the things that people talked about. Like, I remember at a really early Art of Difference getting in this heated argument with somebody, I don't remember who, about the word disability and her favourite version, which was diff, D-I-F-F, ability, and arguing about it. And we don't get to have these sort of conversations about identity face to face very often. And while that wasn't perhaps the happiest conversation I've ever had, so we had these little meetings, and it was this, I think the first one was like a 3 or 4 day event, and it stayed like a 3 or 4 day event. So you got to be able to linger in this alternate universe. Like, you ate with all the crips. Oh my God, you know what they also did that was just amazing? Sorry. After a few years, something that was very radical in Australia at that time, so maybe by now it's 2007, sorry, I'm guessing at the date. I'm not very good with dates. But what Crusader decided to increase the deaf audience potential and deaf cultural interaction with the festival was to employ a deaf consultant who was deaf to sort of take over about a third of the festival. And so in all the shows, there were always about 30% deaf audience, and I've never seen that beaten in Australia. So, I could go on, but we haven't got the time. But Art of Difference really got the ball rolling. And if you look at other states where they've had these key festivals, like South Australia with High Beam, that you get culture and development and funding and offices and people and shows and art coming out of where festivals have been. That's undeniable. And it's a much sort of drier culture, you might say, in places that have never had festivals in that way, like Sydney and Adelaide have had. Melbourne. Did I say Sydney? Sorry, I meant Melbourne.
You said Sydney. It's fine, because
I grew up in Sydney. I get confused. I meant Melbourne. Sorry, everyone.
It's so fine. I think that there's a whole conversation. Maybe it's for another day. I think it probably is about language and where that comes from and who controls it. And it's a really important one to be having, and it's one that we're making a stand about at AAV, positively or negatively at the moment.
Do it.
And I think it's a very interesting thing. The project that we worked on most recently together, Kath, was this incredible project that you directed in collaboration with the University of Melbourne, University of Sydney and AAV, which was called the Last Avantgarde. And I wondered if you wanted to just give us some insight into what that was like for you. Why was that important? What did it find? And it ties specifically for me into this stuff about the exploration of the disability arts movement in Australia.
The Last Avantgarde project started from what I saw as a very public debacle. It was hilarious. It was this one-day event at Melbourne Uni, which was the first half of the project, which was just, I think, 6 short videos. And so there was a panel of non-disabled people up on stage talking about it. And someone in the audience who I don't remember but I adore got up and said, "Where are the disabled people?" And the team up on stage said, oh, we couldn't find any. And the room erupted. I am serious. Big lecture theatre, 300 of us or something. I don't know, maybe less. We had to call a break. It was absolutely fabulous. About a year and a half later, I got approached by one of those people saying, we've got money to actually do this properly and employ disabled people and go around Australia holding workshops, mainly to find out who's there. So who's making art. We were specifically looking at performing arts. So not visual arts so much or writing so much, though we did have sort of some visual artists in the mix. But to cut a long story short, they offered me the job. Actually, no, they didn't. Interestingly, they offered me this chairperson thing that wasn't worth much to start with. And I read through the whole description of the thing and I said, no, I don't want that. I said, I want this lead researcher job and nothing else. And so I got it. So it just goes to show you've really got to stick up, ask for stuff, or, you don't get it. But over the 3 years, we ended up holding workshops in Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart, Alice Springs, Perth, Brisbane, Adelaide, and finally in Canberra. So it was quite the journey around Australia, and we wanted to know what people were doing, what people wanted, and specifically to employ local experienced performance makers, whether musicians or theatre makers, dancers, to teach us. Because what we wanted to do was film it all and collect these inclusive strategies. How do we bring everyone in the room together to collect them and show them? Because we really want to affect broader cultural centres and sectors. We really want to be able to say, these are skills, let's adapt them, let's adopt them and take them on. So, the website, I've just seen the websites on the screen. The website is still in development, but it's nearly there, yay. Along the way, we were also supposed to ask the question of, is there an Australian disability arts aesthetic? So if you sit down in front of a show, you don't know what it is, and it starts happening, could you pick it, accents aside, as an Australian thing, as opposed to an American thing, as opposed to an Asian thing, or whatever? And that question, we're all still arguing about that. So we accumulated 130 participants all around Australia of, deaf, disability, different sorts of impairments and so forth. We employed about 30 facilitators across Australia to show us stuff across all this time. And we've probably got, I don't know, hours of footage that we've kind of cut into these little chunks. And we've got a few broad statements we can make.
And I mean, I think it's amazing. It's such an incredible showcase of those deaf and disabled artists all over the country. So this thing about we don't know where to find them, well, go to this website, you'll find them. And also that one of the brilliant things is, Kath, that you make from the project, there are really clear statements, almost a bit like a manifesto about where do we go from here.
Yeah. And actually, Caroline joined us in the last year or something. Sorry, I don't quite remember. But it was you that suggested we need a manifesto at one of those early meetings, and that really stuck in my head. So thanks for that.
Not at all. Pleasure. In all of that, what did you find out? Like the question about do we have an Australian aesthetic is kind of ongoing. And I think that happens across all of the arts, generally, disability or not, is about do we have an aesthetic. But what was the most interesting thing that you found or that surprised you about the artists that you met, or things that you found out, you discovered on that journey about disability arts in Australia?
I can't remember exactly what's on the website, so I'm just coming on what I think was most important or is most important now from the time. But perhaps what I wasn't expecting is across the sector, so across these 130 people, the emerging performers, dancers, etc., were quite enthusiastic. Anyone that was slightly above emerging is very cynical, tired, feeling neglected, and there is no professional pathway. So I first realised this in Sydney when one of the dancers there, this lovely guy called Matthew Massaria in Sydney, who's been dancing with something Dirty Feet. I might have that a bit wrong, but anyway, for 10 plus years, said, I am so sick of being the special dancer, like when they have a special event for those special people, I get phone calls. And he moves amazingly. But he said, but I don't get invited to do general performance or, performance with other people, performance because it isn't a special day about specialness. And that really stuck in my mind and went across the whole range of the other workshops. Is this, where can we go? Now, if we think about the jobs in Australia for deaf and disabled artists, there's yours and somebody else's. You know what I mean? I mean, really, realistically, unless you're one of those people who gets it together to write amazing funding application after funding application, and lots of people do, and bless them. But that was a really key factor, is where is the professionalism, where is the career development? Because I think a lot of disability arts orgs around Australia are quite focused on the emergings and less focused on the experience. And in a way, then a whole lot of skills get shed and wander off. And people are like, oh God, I know, look, there's nothing wrong with a massage or social work career at all, but you'd be amazed how many disabled people I know who leave the arts to do these other things, just because there's not a survival thing here. So I'd say that was a really key element, is that need for us to think about, we're quite a movement now. We are, and congratulations to us. But, what are we doing about it?
Yeah. What are we doing about it?
Well, good question.
What could we be doing about it? Like, I think this is a question about what could organisations like AAV be doing about it, and also what could the kind of wider sector be doing about it to kind of enhance that?
Well, I've been talking actually to the great Fiona Toomey about this, because she's been reading Bree Hadley. Hi, Bree. Bree's here too. Bree Hadley has been writing, maybe it was somebody else, but anyway, about decolonising disability, in that sense of one of the strategies we have to get our heads around is that a lot of disabled people don't work individually as the sole leader, the leader against, all odds and love. Most of us work in teams and split ourselves and our energies across teams. And so if we want to open up the field, we pretty much have to change what we think of as the field as regular practices, which I think the project was trying to do as well, that we worked on, in that sense of we had 4-hour block workshops that start at midday, and we served food. It's stuff like that. It's kind of shaking up, like saying, the regular 9 to 5 plus hours for people who work in, performance and stuff, doesn't work for us. It excludes us, sure, but, it doesn't really work for us either. So working with the skills we've got on the factory floor, how can we change this to make more room for everybody? I think that's a really key thing. But some of those other guys are kind of a bit further down the track. Like Fiona posed the question of, what does disability-led work look like when previously, and back when I started working in this area, it was all CACD, which is community arts and cultural development. That sort of cap in hand, ching, 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 charity thing, that's kind of gone now. But so what is this new age where we've actually got access to different ways of doing things? What are we going to do with it? Sorry, that was so elaborate.
No, it's great, and it's they're such good questions, and I think they are. I mean, I have the pleasure of working with Fiona as well, and they're the questions that we're throwing up, and I think it's really interesting from having lived in the UK where disability leadership feels so much further ahead than it has been here. So I think there's something interesting. There's lots of there's lots of examples and there's lots of learning, and the concept of crip time and quip time, which is a new one, which is queer and crip time, and what does it look like? And we've been thinking / talking about what happens if we shift the centre. What happens if we build everything around what we need it to look like rather than trying to fulfill what it looks like? And Corona is really this kind of new scenario that we find ourselves in is a really great opportunity for us now to be saying, how do we want to work? What does work for people? How do we want to return? We don't have to return like everybody else. We can make up our own rules and then influence other people. I have questions coming in, Kath, from other people, but you looked like you had a thought.
No, I've lost it now. Let's have a question.
So a question from the wonderful Maddie Little. The very nature of a movement is that it moves over time, and depending on the people engaging in it. How do we encourage people to engage in and learn about this movement while the changing nature of it may be overwhelming to those who are new to it?
Good question. And I remember Jackie Brown answering this sort of by saying we are all at different stages in this journey. I think one of the complications about being disabled is that a lot of what I've done with using scissors, moving my hair, something, I've had to come up with myself. And so we struggle a bit with this thing about trusting and connecting with others who are different, because a lot of us have had to drive our own engine. And I think this is one of the points where we have to be able to acknowledge the skills that are here, not always be reinventing the wheel, but work with the talent that's here and acknowledge the learning that goes both ways. I mean, in Quippings, the new people that we brought on always taught me more than I ever taught them.
That's very generous. I think it was probably a very strong exchange, Kath. As a final thought, and this has come from a a lovely one. Thinking about what could it look like in 10 years from now? Like, what could it look like in 2030? Thinking about your manifesto, what could the arts sector look like, or should it look like in 2030?
I think we've got to grab every leader by the throat and insist that within, I'd like it to happen tomorrow, but that number, that 20% number, that if you take any public funding whatsoever, state, local, federal, that 20% of that amount of budgeting, I'm only talking about arts, but I'd love to see it across the board, goes to deaf and disabled people, productions, access, however it's spent. But that, that no taxation without representation idea, that apply to us. I would love to see that. Just while I'm on it, I'd also like to see all universities across Australia waive all HECS fees, or whatever they call it these days, for deaf and disabled students, full stop, end of, no argument. And to encourage more of us to have, because a lot of uni, arty things are accessible, unlike a lot of private arty things. So there's nothing to stop us. Oh, that's the other thing. We need more management skills, us crips. We don't get the management opportunities. Macca's talked about this once, actually. Oh, God, I'm just going to try and be really fast. Macca's referred to the fact that when they started to do disability-led broadly across the UK, some people just didn't have the management and financial experience. And so they brought in non-disabled people with the specific remit of teaching management skills and then fucking off. Would love to see that. Across the board, not just the arts, across the board.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, Kath, it goes like that. It's too fast. There has obviously in the chat, people are just saying this is such rich and important conversation to be having, and we have it so rarely, and people want more of it. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm guessing that it's, I mean, we need to do a part 2, really. And maybe it is some of that long-term dreaming about what does it look like? What do we need to still be learning? But thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us to be part of the conversation. But yeah, thanks, Kath, for your generosity and wisdom. It's greatly appreciated. Just before we finish off, just to say that the ferals are going to take a breath, which is much needed for the next 2 weeks at least from the little lunches. They're just going to have a mini break. We're not going to let them go forever, but that they're going to have a break because they've got to get on with some other stuff. You know, this is kind of takes over everything because they're doing such a brilliant job of it. So the little lunches will come back in early July. The start back date is yet to be determined, but we're all on a mailing list, so keep aware of when that's going to happen. And one of our first conversations that we will come back with on the Thursday, focused on access, is going to be with the brilliant Bree Hadley from Queensland University of Technology, and we are going to talk about allyship. How can you be a good ally to deaf and disabled artists? So that's our next hot topic. So yeah, keep connected, and we'll look forward to catching up with you all in July when we get back, and thanks again for all joining. Bye, Macca. Go to bed now.